Listen, man, I'm sure you're busy, so my style is typically just to jump into these things if you're ready to rock.
Yeah, man, let's roll.
Cool.
I got like 45 minutes, so
Perfect.
I don't know how long you need, but yeah, that's what I got.
Well, we'll work with what we got.
Okay, cool.
Anyways, man, thanks for coming on. I've been following you for a while. I appreciate the time. I know you've been speaking about and to about Bitcoin and to Bitcoiners a little bit lately.
Hmm.
Followed you on your podcast, and I just wanted to have you on today to have a chat, pick your brain a little bit, and see what was up.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, that sounds good to me, man.
So one of the I no particular direction with this conversation, but I was listening to we both had the shall we say pleasure of interviewing John McAfee. I know you spoke to him recently, and
Yeah.
I interviewed him in person a couple of years ago, and obviously infamous and very interesting guy.
Hmm.
What was your take impression on that discussion?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. It went in a direction I wasn't necessarily expecting it to. We ended up having a big conversation and somewhat of a disagreement about the fundamental concept of morality. But yeah, that was interesting. I love those kind of conversations. I'm very, very open-minded, and I'm always open to have my beliefs challenged and to be presented with different ideas and opinions and stuff like that. And yeah, I think in hindsight, I think I understand what he was getting at. Um, and I agree with it to a degree. I disagree with it to another degree. But yeah, it was a ultimately an interesting, enlightening, and somewhat challenging conversation as well.
Yeah, John's a bit of an enigma. He I guess the Bitcoin community has sort of a love-hate relationship with him because at certain points he's a supporter of Bitcoin, and other times he's very critical. But what
Hmm.
I found striking about John, if you follow him on Twitter, you just think or follow his life story or his or whatever, you think this guy is off the wall. This
Yeah,
guy is erratic at best.
yeah.
And but then I heard him speak at a conference the time I interviewed him in 2018 in the summer, and he can if he tries. That I do think he has a decent amount of wisdom in him, and when he settles himself down enough to articulate it,
Hmm.
I think it can be worthwhile, and it is worthy of a deeper conversation. But getting him to kind of stay within the confines of like a rational, logical, articulate conversation can be difficult. But I actually did enjoy my conversation with him as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, definitely. I mean, he's obviously super intelligent. There's no way he would have been able to do and achieve what he's done otherwise. And yeah, he's in his 70s. He's been around for a long time. Anybody like that is going to have some wisdom that they can impart on you, whether or not you totally agree with them or disagree with them. But they're obviously going to have a lot of life experiences and things that they've thought about and things that they can present and expose to you that you may not have thought of otherwise. And so to me, that's always very valuable.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I mean, not that he was ever one to give much of a shit, but if you're 78 or 76 or however old he is, I can imagine myself being a loser, let's say, at that time as well.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Um, Zuby, I'm interested in your story, and we have limited time, so if you can give me the kind of not the Cole's Notes version, because people, I think a lot of listeners, they've heard you on a couple different podcasts now. They're probably familiar, but I'm just curious. I know you were born in the UK, raised in Saudi,
Hmm.
live back in the UK now, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm in the
Yeah.
UK now.
So, what was it like growing up in Saudi? I was an expat. I lived in China for the last 10 years. So
Okay.
I was an expat there, and I know the expat life, the living, like the neighborhoods and the schools, and
Hmm.
how it all works. What was it like, being part of an expat family in Saudi Arabia?
It was brilliant, to be honest with you. In a short sentence, it was a very positive experience for me. That where I grew up, I lived in a great area, great friends with great families, went to a good school, had great teachers, and had a lot of overall positive experiences about it. Even venturing out of the community, leaving the camp and going out into the city and stuff like that, whether that was for shopping or for anything else. my overall impression on Saudi is positive. My memories are positive. A lot of people don't like me saying that, or they want me to come out and say all this bad stuff about the country that they're sort of expecting. But the truth is that I had a very positive experience, and I'm very open and honest about that. And I'm not going to paint a false picture of what I personally experienced there during my lifetime.
Yeah.
But
And
it was sorry, but
go
to
ahead.
say I mean, it was pretty different in a lot of aspects from growing up in the UK or perhaps growing up in the US or anywhere else. So there are certain things that were just sort of different and unique, which at the time I sort of thought like, okay, that's just how it is. But then now that I live in the UK, or when I came back to the UK, it was like, oh, okay, that's actually kind of curious. That's different.
Right.
Even very minor things like the weekends being on different days, right? So in Saudi, the weekend is Thursday and Friday, whereas in most of the world, the weekend is Saturday and Sunday. So little things like that. The shops closing 5 times a day for prayers, which is a bizarre concept to someone who's used to shopping in the UK or USA, right? You don't have to leave the shop so that they can shutter up in the middle of the day for 15 minutes, and then
Right.
they'll do that again a couple hours later. But stuff like that, you get used to quickly, and you understand why it's like that. And yeah, you think whenever you're any given country, you've got to just sort of have a level of respect for the way that they do things and understand it.
Yeah, for sure. How much did, an upbringing like that contribute to, for people that maybe don't follow you on social media or whatever, I would just say simply that you're, a free thinking individual who's not afraid of expressing themselves. And I think that's awesome. I wish there were more people that fell into that category. It seems to be somewhat in short supply these days, although,
Mm,
hopefully growing. And you've received both praise and pushback for that.
mhm.
Um, how much did growing up in that environment inform your views or put you in a position where you felt confident to express in this particular case kind of social political commentary?
That's a good question. I don't think that growing up there specifically had an impact on why I do it, but in terms of the things I say and the way that I think it's helped to give me a perspective, to be able to see things from more perspectives than the average person can.
Mhm.
So I have had heavy exposure to 4 very different cultures specifically. So my family background is originally from Nigeria. I was born in the UK. I'm a British citizen. I live in the UK. I went to an American school for from kindergarten up until 5th grade, and most of my teachers were American, and I was surrounded by Americans, and I majority of my followers on social media are America. I'm very tuned into what's going on in America. I've even got the accent
You
to a some
sound like an
degree.
American.
Exactly. And then I lived in Saudi Arabia for 19 years. So I can see, and beyond that, I've traveled to, I think at the time of speaking, 33 different countries as well. So I've got a good global perspective, I think, on things, much more so than someone may have who hasn't had those opportunities or who hasn't really traveled around a lot. So on a lot of different issues, I can see the pros and cons in different ways. And I can see the things which are good and bad, and or the things that are just different, without
Mhm.
always necessarily even viewing it purely through a simple good and bad concept. So for example, and you can have this even with countries that are quite similar. So the UK and USA, in the grand scheme of things, people tend to look at those countries as being fairly similar, and they are in some ways, but they're also very different, even culturally, even in terms of the law, even in terms of the way things are structured and the way people think and the way people behave. They're quite different countries. I think if we didn't all speak English, that might be more apparent. But you can certainly see it. I mean, to take some of the to take it on a like a very obvious and simple issue. Okay, take something like the Second Amendment. Okay,
Mhm.
people in the UK do not under the average person in the UK does not understand the Amendment whatsoever, right? They just
Mhm.
think guns are dangerous, ban them, right? Just they think it's that simple. And I can totally understand the Second Amendment, and in fact, I'm not American, but I support the Second Amendment, right? I think it's I can understand the arguments against citizens owning guns, and it's not the norm in most countries around the world. It's not the norm in the UK or Europe or Australia, etc. So a lot of people in the UK, in quite an arrogant sense, I think, look at the US and just go like, oh, those crazy Americans and their guns and this and that, and they sort of talk down on it. And it can happen in the inverse, right? You can have Americans who kind of look at the UK and they're like, oh my gosh, you guys can't have guns. You guys are, you're not even citizens, you're subjects of the of the Queen, etc. And I can understand both of those perspectives. And they're both right to a degree and they're both wrong to a degree. And having these different experiences and then growing up in a place like Saudi Arabia, which is also very culturally different, very different in terms of the laws, the belief systems, the way, the, lots of these different factors. I can look at them all, and I can look at them all in a critical sense. I can look at them all in a praiseworthy sense. I like all four countries, and I like aspects of all four, and there are things of aspects of all four that I may be critical of. And it's just given me that perspective to sort of see it from the different angles rather than just seeing it from one mindset and thinking, okay, this is how it is in my country or in my area. And so this is just the best. And this is how it should be everywhere. And there's no debate and there's no discussion to be had. And it's just that simple.
Yeah.
So I think that me growing up in the way that I have has helped to give me that open, extra open-minded perspective and ability to think that, okay, it's not just the one size fits all isn't really the way to look at everything.
Yeah, for sure. I relate to that a lot. And also, when I would come home throughout the years, I would try to articulate to people that I felt the greatest culture shock when I would return home. And I
Mm,
think a part of that is because as you were kind of articulating there, the if you don't ever spend any kind of significant amount of time outside of your where you grew up or where you were born, you're very much in a kind of bubble that you can't see, and
mhm.
you're influenced and informed by the culture. um, and even if you kind of recognize that to some degree, you don't really understand how it kind of influences you in a very uh, very subconscious way. And I would come home and I would, and China, again, kind of your same story as you, a lot of criticisms to be levied at China by the West in particular. And I don't disagree with them in large part. But the younger generation in China, let's say under 40, are extremely educated, worldly. They want to travel. They're very well put together. They're extremely ambitious. They're extremely hardworking. And this kind of causes them to have a more objective framework for looking out at the world. They're just very curious. And even though there's an underwriting extremely strong nationalism because they've been kind of propagandized for their entire existence, it's almost less than the cultural actually, I would say it is less than the cultural influence that I notice when I return home, just because they are curious what happens beyond their borders, and they kind of grew up in an environment where where they believed that the cultures beyond their borders were superior. And I know people might find that surprising because China is these days so kind of nationalistic, but they very much idolized the West and the lifestyle that people in the West have been leading, and that's why they're so ambitious to have it. And so what that kind of has done is given them a bit more of an objective view. And so when I was returning home, I always found like people here were less just less aware of what was happening outside their bubble, and it meant
Yeah.
that they weren't they went along with kind of the dominant point of view more easily.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing about, it's very difficult to speak about an entire country, but in a way,
Sure.
countries have personalities to a degree. I guess you could kind of say that's almost what a culture is. There's 330 million Americans, so it's hard to say, it's silly in a way to say Americans are like X or Americans are like this or Americans
Sure.
are like that, because it's like, really, you're speaking for all of these people. But I think on average, say for example, it would be fair to say that Americans are more insular than, say, people in the UK. And a big factor, and there are some obvious reasons for this. Some are just look at the size of the country.
Hmm.
Okay. If you live in America, if you live in the USA, you could travel a lot and experience a lot without ever leaving your country, right?
Yeah.
It's huge. It's massive. And you've got such a range. You've got all different climates, different terrain, different scenery. Like you could just travel throughout the USA for decades and you'll constantly be seeing things you haven't seen and even experiencing different cultures within American culture
Yeah.
that you haven't experienced before. The UK is a lot smaller, right? The UK is smaller than Texas, Alaska, California, right? It's smaller than multiple states. And so, and you're also very geographically close to a lot of other countries. So in the US, you're close to, well, depending on where you live, you might not even be close to Canada or close to Mexico, right? You're far from everything. UK, we're an island, but you're close to within 2 hours of flying, I can get to, I don't know, 30 countries, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. So so if I want to go to France or Germany or Sweden or Austria or Czech Republic or whatever, it's very easy to do and it's very cheap to do. And as a result, I think people in the UK do travel more. And we've of course got the EU and the well, we don't anymore now, but when we did, right, you're kind of more attached to other countries in a way, even from a political sense.
Sure.
So as a result of that, I would say on a very sort of average level, the average person in the UK probably has a better knowledge of other countries, at least to some degree, than the average American.
Yeah.
Um, and there are reasons for that. So it's, there are a lot of different things, and yeah, I don't know. You know what? I'm gonna send it back to you because
Sure.
I don't want
Sure.
to I don't want to answer a question that's not being asked.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you're saying. And just on the final point about kind of where you are now, and I want to take it back to kind of how you started in a second, but you brought up the Second Amendment. I'm from Canada, and we recently, there was a horrific shooting in Nova Scotia, which is on the East Coast, last week.
Mm,
I think 20 dead. Just a horrible tragedy. And the prime minister response to that was to ban 1,500 different types of quote assault style weapons.
mhm.
And it's always framed, at least in Canada, because again, like you were saying, we don't have the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
um, the framing is always, you don't need a clip of this size or a gun of this style for hunting. These
Mm,
guns are purely for killing as many people as possible in the shortest amount of time.
mm,
And um, the argument never comes up that the Second Amendment's not about hunting. The Second
no.
Amendment is a recognition that even in democracies, tyrannical governments can manifest, and that's a genuine risk in democracies. And
Mm,
the Second Amendment is meant to be to balance the power, to be a check on a tyrannical or an overly dictatorial authoritarian government. It's
mhm.
not about hunting.
No.
And what I appreciate again about kind of your foray, I know you rap and you're into fitness and you've published CDs and books and stuff, but part of your foray into kind of the political dialogue is saying these somewhat unpopular, unconventional things, and stimulating conversation over that. And I think that's a tremendously valuable thing for anybody with any kind of audience to do these days, because these are important aspects of the conversation that just simply are not happening enough in the mainstream. I think maybe they're becoming so, but I appreciate that you're willing to go there despite what pushback you may get for it.
Yeah, thank you, man. And it's interesting. I mean, because I've been this way for a very long time, but it wasn't until 2018 that I kind of revealed it to the world and sort of showed people that side of me. Because I mean, I've been on Twitter since 2009, been on social media since, I don't know, 2004 or something.
I saw some
And I've
old
been,
YouTube vids.
yeah, yeah. And I've been on, and I've, yeah, I don't know. And I've been making music for well over a decade as well. And I used to always sort of keep those thoughts in the personal realm. So anyone who knows me personally, family, friends, etc., we'd have all these conversations and everything like that. And then in 2018, I just started to for various reasons, I started to use my account to just talk more about certain things that I thought were interesting, or share different perspectives and get conversations going and stuff like that. And that has, massively grown now to a following of hundreds of thousands of people. And I do, and it's weird. I mean, I didn't know that the way I think was unique. Right? I didn't know it was unique. Right? I always kind of thought like, okay, I'm having these thoughts and whatever, and most people probably sort of think the same way. And then as I started to open up about that more, and to just have these conversations in public, I realized, oh wow, okay, this is sort of, people are really liking this, right? The people think that this is something special, or that my perspective is interesting. People want to invite me on their podcasts and interview me and stuff like that, because I'm coming with a unique perspective and way of articulating things, which I guess is relatively rare, much rarer than I previously thought it was.
Hmm.
So I think perhaps I kind of sold myself short in that regard. But yeah, ultimately, I mean, my goal fundamentally is to have a positive impact on people, and to inspire other people, and also to encourage people to be honest, to be authentic, etc. I'm not trying to sort of force my vision on the world down on people or anything, but I enjoy conversations. And in my music, as a full-time musician, one part of my brain that I felt like wasn't totally getting satisfied was the conversational aspect, right? It's why I wanted to start my own podcast and do stuff like what we're doing now, have these conversations, because I think that putting these ideas out into the ether and getting people to talk and have conversations, etc., I think ultimately only good can come from that, right? Only good can come from that. And ideally, this can happen across different lines. So I'm not super political, right? I'm not like super duper political, but I like to understand the way people think, why they believe what they believe, why they do what they do, say what they say, etc. So that curiosity does naturally cross into the realm of politics, or occasionally religion, or morality, or whatever it might be. And I want to, rather than just being sort of, I've got my own personal views on things, and I'm not afraid to say what they are, but I like to get those conversations going. And one great thing I'm really happy about with my social media audience is that it's truly diverse, right? In the realest sense. Like,
Hmm.
I can start a conversation about almost any topic, and it will just take on a life of its own, right? Some people will agree, some people will disagree, some people have this perspective, some people have that. And yeah, sometimes it can get a bit out of hand. Sometimes it can get a little bit too angry and hostile and stuff, which is not what I try to I don't try to indulge that or recommend people go that way. But it's kind of cool the way over time it's sort of morphed into this. My Twitter is almost a forum now. Like, I can have days. I haven't tweeted. I took 48 hours off Twitter, and I was looking at it today, and it's like I still did over 100,000 impressions on the weekend, despite not even tweeting anything. And this is just people sort of conversating in the comment sections. It's kind of like a forum,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, well, that's not necessarily what I set out to do, but it's kind of cool that it's become that, and people feel that they can have conversations there, and I'm not going to just, ban or block people because they dissent or whatever it is, and I think hopefully, yeah, I think in the grand scheme of things that a lot of good comes from that. And I do get DMs and messages and etc. from people who suggest that, yeah, that is the case.
100%. I just think, we're living in a time where a lot of people look out on the world and they think, "Ah, man, this just doesn't really add up," or this, things should be different, or, it doesn't square with them. And then they
Mhm.
hear a lot of the talking voices and they say, how come nobody's addressing this stuff? And so I think when people step out and they have the courage, really, and the skill, of course, to articulate yourself, and because I think to articulate yourself well and clearly, you do have to do a lot of work on yourself,
Yeah.
and especially for your perspective that you reference, to be of value to people. I think the more time you put into kind of understanding yourself and that perspective, and the better you are at articulating it, the more people are
Mhm.
going to respond to it positively. But I think people are just looking out and saying, are recognizing the value of people that step out with courage and say, you know, I'm going to speak my mind, and kind of some of the questions that I have, or the curiosity I've had, I have, or the truths that I'm dancing around, if they're not completely set in stone yet. And I don't want to be, I don't want to put myself in a class or be characterized one way or the other. Are you right or left? Are you this or that? Like, no, you ask me a question and I'll give you my answer as I'm currently thinking about it. And that says nothing about my answer to any other question. It's
Yeah.
the answer to that question. And I
Yeah.
think, I think there's a huge hunger for that. And so I think people that are stepping out and have the courage to do it, are gaining an audience. And I think that's definitely a part of what you've been doing. And one of the kind of related to that, what I'd like to add, I think one of the things that a lot of people struggle with, and I'm no exception, is let's say you come out of high school and or university, whichever place is your kind of finish of formal education, and you look out on the world. It's a big mess. I've got a lot of questions. I don't like how this goes. I like how this goes. Whatever your perspective is, and you orient yourself a certain way toward going in a certain direction that you think may be beneficial. And maybe you're correct and a path opens up, or maybe you have a few false starts, or you try a few different things, and you have to find your way that way.
Hmm.
With you mentioned having kind of gotten into music, and fitness, actually, if I'm not mistaken, kind of at a pretty young age.
Hmm.
And I was looking at some of your YouTube videos, and I think like the earliest one on YouTube is 13 years ago. And you look a bit younger, but you're there, you got the Zuby gear on, you're rapping, you do whatever.
Yeah.
And what was it that led you um, to pursuing that path at a young age? Like, you're looking out at the world, you're introspective. Uh, why did you want to go down that path? Why that in particular?
You mean music specifically?
Yeah, or if I'm
Yeah.
missing anything, like whichever path, however you'd characterize your path, what was
Okay.
it that kind of gave you the confidence to go down that one?
Yeah. So, I mean, with music specifically, so I started rapping when I was in university. So I went to Oxford University at the age of 18 to study computer science. And in my first or second term there, I just started rapping as a hobby. I'd been a hip hop fan for a while, and I just started writing stuff down and, recording it into my phone and just doing some basic stuff. And people liked it. People responded well to it. So I started recording actual songs on beats. I made a couple of songs and just put them out via email and uploaded them to this before SoundCloud, and YouTube was just coming up, and there was a website called SoundClick, and then MySpace. And I used to, put my songs up there and get feedback and stuff like that. And then I released my first album when I was in my second year of university. So I released my first album when I was 19. And yeah, I ended up selling 3,000 copies of it independently without a record label, without any marketing budget, just off of my own hustle.
Nice.
And I think that was the stage where I realized that I could do something. I could do something with that. And I was getting positive feedback, and I was getting people saying, yeah, man, like what you're doing is it's important in some way, right? It's having an impact on people. It's having an influence on people. I could see that both offline and online. And so after I graduated, I took a year out and did my music full time. I released a second album, and then I moved to London, and I worked in the corporate world for 3 years. So from 2008 to 2011, I was in the corporate world. And yeah, I felt like I have a calling. I feel like God has put me on earth for a specific reason. Funnily enough, my name actually means God's decision. That's the translation of it. And
Is that your like birth name?
yeah, the full version of my name. Zuby is the short version of it, but my full name means God's decision.
What is it?
And
What's the full version?
Unzubechuku.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, so I feel like I have a very specific, not just feel, I know I have a specific purpose on this earth. And I am working every day to fulfill it. And some of that comes through my music. It all started out with just the music. And the reason I have branched out into other things is because I know that I have other things that I can offer. So there are some people I won't necessarily be able to reach directly through my music, but you know what? Maybe I can reach them through a podcast, through an interview, public speaking. Maybe I can help them with their fitness and their mindset and their health and their nutrition through my book. There's a lot of things that I am able to speak on, in which I have knowledge and expertise on. And why should I keep all that away from the public? Right? That's the wrong way to do it. That's selfish of me to do it that way. Right? If I have knowledge that could help people, or I have a perspective that could possibly help people, I feel like it is my ethical duty. It's now my moral duty to put that out there. Right? If I can write a fitness book, and people are suffering with their health and their confidence, etc., because they're out of shape and they don't know the right foods to eat and they don't know how to train and they don't know how to work out and they're struggling because of that, it's my ethical duty to help them. And how can I help them? Oh, if I write a book, I can actually help a lot of people. Yeah, sure. I can also monetize that, and there's nothing wrong with monetizing things, and I think you should. But I can help those people, right? If I've got that knowledge and that ability to help people, then I must do it. And that's really the way I look at it, and that's what drives me. And I know that if I were to do something sort of more normal, so when I did work as a management consultant, I just knew, look, there's no way I can impact a million people through this. I can't, right? I can do well, I can make money for myself and my future family, and I can have a level of stability and security, etc. But I can't leave a dent on the world. I want to leave a dent on the world. When I don't want to die anytime soon, but when I die, I want millions of people to be upset that I died. Not because I want millions of people to be upset, but I want to have an impact on the world. That is great. And that might sound crazy to some people. That's like, whoa, that's super ambitious. But I know I have the potential. I know I have the potential to do that. And I know that I'm impacting hundreds of thousands of people. I don't know, maybe I've impacted a million people already in some way, shape, or form. But I think it's my job to fulfill that potential. I've been given certain gifts, a certain mind, certain abilities, a certain level of even dedication and determination. And so I can't squander that. I
Right.
can't squander that. And that's really where, at a deep level, that's where my sort of motivation and hustle and drive comes from.
Yeah. I I resonate with a lot of what you just said, and I think maybe we all struggle with this. Maybe not so much people that are only on the sidelines judging, but I think you know an aspect of doing that, expressing yourself, can you can wonder sometimes, is this a manifestation of ego, right? Am I
Mhm.
just expressing this to feel good,
Mhm.
for the accolades, for the praise, for the likes, whatever? But I think one of the things you touched on was, I think, and this, we don't have enough time to really dig into this, but I'll just drop it anyways. But when you when you behold or encounter or discover truth, I think it's almost like a good to express it or articulate it,
Mhm.
rather than keeping it bottled up. Not that you have to express everything, but I think I think that's an element of truth, in that you express it or become it once you fully realize it. And I think, even though you could argue that any outward expression could be a manifestation of ego,
Mhm.
um, I don't think it's as absolutely. I don't think it's as absolute or rigid as that. And I kind of agree with what you said, in that if you have this potential and if you have this purpose, then I see nothing wrong with amplifying the shit out of it. So
Yeah, as
good for
long as it's
you.
positive. As long as
Yeah,
it's positive,
yeah,
I
hundred
wish
percent.
everybody. Yeah, if
Um,
you're,
uh,
if, yeah, go ahead.
no, you finish. You finish.
I was gonna say, if your lifetime ambition is to like murder people or something, then yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Keep that
then I
to
want.
yourself. Keep that to
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah. But as long as what you're trying to do is good, then
Yeah. Well, speaking of good, Zuby, last little part I want to discuss with you was, of course, Bitcoin. You've been talking a lot about it, and people in the Bitcoin community. Um, I think we are of the opinion that this is kind of an inevitability. And when I say we, I shouldn't say we. Like, I think this is a type of truth, kind of reflecting on what I just said, that I think will assert itself on the world.
hmm
But nevertheless, when other people that are into other kind of domains begin to see it and begin to articulate it, then it's always interesting to connect with them and kind of understand why. And so, I guess my main question for you is, what about Bitcoin is interesting to you? Why do you see value in it, and have been dropping a little bit on Twitter here and there, and talking with people in the space?
yeah. Wow. Wow, where do I start with this? What appeals to me about Bitcoin is Bitcoin's a funny thing because what I find appealing about it and what I think most people who are into it do to some degree is the same thing that puts people off it, right? So what I consider a pro, somebody else might consider a con. So the whole concept of having a limited, rare, um, immutable, unhackable, not backed or created by any government form of currency is hugely appealing to me, perhaps because of my worldview or my socio-political views, right? Other people, that puts them off, right? The fact, well, it's not backed by anyone. The
Sure.
government's not involved, right? That scares them. Oh, it's limited in number, right? You can't make more of them. That's terrible. I'm like, yeah, that's great. You know, so in terms of being an actual form of money in the true sense, in the proper sense of what money is supposed to be, then I think Bitcoin is one of the best versions of it ever created, right? It has a lot of the properties of certain precious metals or things like gold, but at a better level in terms, you can't carry around gold bars everywhere with you. Selling gold is not particularly easy. Um, and you can make more, you can't make more gold, but you can mine more gold. There's way more gold that hasn't been mined every year. I don't know the numbers, but a lot of tons and tons of gold gets mined up every year,
Hmm.
and there will keep being more of it. So if you look at it from the sort of digital gold perspective, as I know a lot of people do, then there seems to be a clear case there. But in terms of actually solving a real world problem, and again, as someone who's very internationally minded, the having a currency or forms of currency which can be sent across borders at high speed without the need for a middleman, and without the ability for, you know sure, fraud can be done in different ways, but certain types of fraud being possible, things like chargebacks, etc., and having very low latency and very low fees as well, very low costs, that fulfills a very specific purpose, right? There is a value in that. Internationally, the amount of billions, possibly even trillions, that are sent in remittances is crazy, and people pay 20%, 30% fees through companies like Western Union, or even if you use PayPal might take a, I don't know, 5%, 6% chunk of whatever is being sent. And that shouldn't be the case, right? There does need to be, there is a legitimate use case for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general. In those cases, I think Bitcoin may work better as a store of value, as a lot of people um, discuss it. But yeah, all of these things are interesting to me, and also as someone who comes from a computer science background, even just as a technology, as the first digital thing that's ever been created, which it has scarcity,
Mm.
is super interesting to me, because it doesn't sound like it should be, possible, because prior to Bitcoin it never was possible, right? If I send you a file, whether it's an MP3 or a movie or a picture or whatever, I don't then not have it, right? I'm just creating copies, and you've got infinite copies. You can make infinite copies of whatever digital file you want. So having the concept of, okay, this is a currency, and it's also a technology where you've got this distributed ledger, and you can't copy it, and you can't sort of hack it, and all from both the technological aspect and the economic aspect and the investment aspect and the political aspect, all of them appeal to me.
Yeah.
All of them appeal to me, right? I'm quite a libertarian person. I'm not like 100% anarcho-capitalist type, but my leanings are generally quite libertarian. I think that governments do too much, and I think that they do too much stuff badly. And I like the idea of people being sovereign and being able to control their own stuff, from their money to their behavior, etc. And so, yeah, Bitcoin to me was, for all the above reasons, it's a fairly easy sell to someone with my sort of world perspective. And so to me, that's why I'm interested in it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you just said. And just the last kind of question on Bitcoin, but where it seems like it came pretty intuitively to you, both because of your computer science background and because of your kind of libertarian leanings and world life experiences, et cetera. Where do you, how do you continue to refine your understanding? Are there resources that
Mm.
you go to kind of continue down the rabbit hole, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, on a regular basis, not that much. But there was a time when I was so 20 late 2017, all through 2018, and a lot of 2019. I was doing a lot of research, I read multiple books, listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos, spending a lot of time on crypto Twitter and all that. And yeah, that helped me to a lot of that stage was my sort of proper research to really understand the fundamentals and to understand even the market cycles and the way that the price fluctuates and why there was a lot of there I went through a lot of research, probably dozens if not hundreds of hours of sort of really looking into it and seeing, okay, and challenging my own beliefs and seeing, okay, what are the best arguments against it, and seeing what
Hmm.
people are saying on the opposite side and everything like that. And now, I mean, on a day-to-day basis, I don't I'm into Bitcoin. I'm not like hardcore. I'm not like a sort of hardcore, my world revolves around Bitcoin kind of person. I do know people like that who, Bitcoin is really, it's very, very fundamental to their entire career and everything.
Uh-huh.
And, and that's cool. But I'm not in that deep. I do too many other things for one thing to sort of become the totality
Sure.
of what I talk about like that. But yeah, I follow people in the space. I've had podcasts on my own podcast. I've appeared on some pretty big Bitcoin podcasts. So yeah, that's kind of how I keep in the loop, I guess.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's sensible, right? It's not going to be the main thing for everybody, right? But I
Yeah.
think, you represent a type of person that has open eyes and objective thinking. And so when you come across something that you think represents value or that's unique or that has a potential to have positive impact,
Hmm.
you spend time on it, try to understand it, keep it on your mental bookshelf. But,
Hmm.
obviously you've got other ambitions and pursuits. And, I think that's what it will become for a lot of people, because a lot of people aren't going to go crazy over how it works and the potential implications in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years,
Yeah.
but they'll understand that this is something worthy of keeping track of and trying to understand a little bit and keeping it in the mix.
Yeah.
So
That's what I tell to people, even people who are skeptical. I'm like, look, I recommend, I'm not even going to tell you to buy it. Right. But I would recommend looking into this thing.
yeah,
I have a general rule in life that if a lot of very intelligent people are interested in something, it's probably worth having a look at.
yeah, I think that
Probably worth having a look at. Yeah.
I think that's a real good hack for determining what to have a look at. Is if a
Yeah.
lot of super smart people are into it, it's probably worth a look.
Yeah. It's the whole concept can't be given some of the people who are interested in, invested in, and positive about Bitcoin, including some of the smartest, richest, most successful people in the world. It's at least worth having a look at, right? Like,
Yeah,
okay, well, why are all these people talking about this thing?
totally.
Even if you come to the conclusion that it's too risky, I don't want to get involved, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But you should
At the
probably have a
very
look.
least, it should stop you from dismissing it outright without having a
Yeah,
look at it first, right?
yeah, exactly.
Zuby, I know you got to roll. So this is the last part. I finish every episode with a very quick word association. So I just say a word and you tell me the first thing that comes to your head. You
Okay,
down
go
with
ahead.
that?
Yeah, let's do it. I'll try to stay out of trouble.
Democracy,
Uh, okay,
government,
bad,
human rights,
flexible,
violence,
bad,
Trump,
good.
ego,
Keep it in check.
FOMO,
Don't do it.
wealth,
Build it.
privacy,
Coin
hate speech,
doesn't exist.
gold,
Solid.
guns.
Uh, um, why do I not have a feel? Nothing comes to my mind. Um, Guns. 2A.
Revolution.
Nah.
Socialism.
Bad.
Family.
Love it.
Inequality.
Not a problem.
Hell.
Real.
Liberty.
Good.
Energy.
Can't be created or destroyed.
Bitcoin.
Good.
That's it, Zuby. You did great, man. Super fun chatting with you, man. I know we could chew up a few more hours, but I know you got lots of other stuff to be at, so maybe we'll pick it up again some other time. But
Awesome.
just want to say, I appreciate the work you're doing. I appreciate your perspective, the courage it takes to put yourself out there and get involved in these conversations, and just keep up the great work, man. I look forward to seeing your career progress.
I appreciate it, bro. You have a good one, yeah?
You too, brother. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.